Good morning. Alan was very keen to worship, but not quite yet. Alan, a little bit later, but we'll have a great time to sing together powerfully before we finish today. Good morning. It's great to be together. Good morning to our online congregation. So good to be joining with you today, and of course to everyone here in the room. A few weeks ago, Laura and I went to a plumber's shop. We were looking to purchase a new shower head. And we walked into the shop really excited to look at the variety of showers that they had and to make a purchase. And we were chatting to the salesman, this big, burly, kind of really stereotypical plumber-looking guy who was leading us through the shop. And we asked him the question that I reckon he gets asked every time he takes customers to the shower section. You know how in some jobs you just get asked the same question again and again and again, and it drives you crazy. We stood in front of the showers, and what do you reckon we said to him? We said, look, we're looking for a shower that, we don't want to get cold when we're in the shower. We want to be warm and just have that thing covering us in that rain shower. We want to be completely wet. So which one of these showers will make us most wet when we stand in the shower? And he kind of rolled his eyes. I think this might have been the third or fourth time today he'd had this conversation day after day after day. You can imagine he'd say the same thing again and again. And he said to us, look, I'm just going to tell you how it is. All of these showers, they're exactly the same. The manufacturers, they will market them to you. They will say that they can do this and that, and this is the best, the market leader, all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, these ones you're looking at, they're all exactly the same. Because the amount of water that comes through them has a lot less to do with the shower head than it does with the pressure of the mains coming to your block. He said, ultimately, the water coming to your block runs at 7.5 litres per minute. That's it. Builders, if I'm wrong, forget it. This is just what he told us, all right? 7.5 litres per minute. That's the capacity of water that can come into your house. It protects all your taps. It stops things blowing off the kitchen sink and so on. That's it, 7.5 litres of water per minute. So the manufacturers can tell you whatever they want. That theirs can do 10 or 15 or 20 litres per minute. It's irrelevant. You live in Melbourne. It can come out at 7.5 litres per minute. That's it. So all of these showers are exactly the same. And what I want to say to you today is that in many ways, we can live our lives thinking we're at capacity, thinking that we are on a winner doing the greatest thing that you could do, but actually we are under a capacity with what we can experience and see in our lives. So many of us live our lives like in the shower, 7.5 litres per minute, that's the capacity, and we think this is it. This is everything that I can expect to have out of life, but actually God's heart for us is something very different. It is something incredibly different. It's like getting out of the shower, thinking that that's it, and diving into the ocean, where the water that you're exposed to is boundless and endless. The possibilities reach to the horizon and beyond. God's heart for us is to not be limited to the capacity set by something else, but instead to step into the boundless opportunities that He has for us. And it has to do with the identity that we see ourselves in. And so I want to jump into our text for today from Ephesians 1, picking up from where Alan spoke last week. Verse 7 to 10 is what we're going to look at. And as Alan said, we're in the middle of what's effectively a 12-verse, one-sentence kind of run by Paul. This massive big idea as he lays out the most important aspects of following Jesus as he sees it, the big picture of what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus in the world. And we're in the middle of it now. From verse 7, it says this: in Him, that is in Jesus, we have redemption through His blood, the forgiveness of sins, in accordance with the riches of God's grace that He lavished on us. With all wisdom and understanding, He made known to us the mystery of His will, according to His good pleasure, which He purposed in Christ, to be put into effect when the times reach their fulfillment, to bring unity to all things in heaven and on earth under Christ. Now, if you're like me, you hear this and there's just a lot of words. There's a lot of big ideas. There's just so much going on. This is kind of Paul at his finest, just launching ideas. Let me just go through this one more time and just unpack it a little bit so then we can run on from here today. In him we have redemption through his blood. In Jesus, redemption is found in the death and the resurrection of Jesus. We are forgiven. We are set free. And this is an example of God's lavish grace. I love that. Lavish grace. Lavish is just extravagant, over the top, unnecessary. This is the grace of God towards you. He could have done this, but actually he went way over here and did that. This is God's lavish gift of grace. And he reveals the mystery of his work in this world through Christ. And what is Christ's work? What is the big thing that Paul wants us to see and understand and know about Jesus' central purpose in this world? It's to bring unity. Unity to all things. Not unity to some things. Not just unity to forgiveness of my sins so that I would be free, but unity to all things in heaven and on earth. All things in heaven and all things on earth. This is what Jesus' work is about. This is the central thing that God is doing. And Paul wants us to see that Christ is about bringing unity into all things in heaven and on earth. This is what Paul is wanting us to see in these 3 short verses. Last week, if you heard Alan's message, if you didn't, you really need to hear it. It's fantastic stuff. He said that we should step in to Christ's identity, to God's identity that he has for us. 2 things that Alan said is that our identity is that we're adopted children of God, adopted sons and daughters. This is part 1 of our identity. Part 2 of our identity is that God declares us holy. We're not holy because we behave a certain way. No, we're holy because God declares us holy when we follow him. And then behavior follows from that. And so today I want to keep building on that identity, following on what Paul is saying in this sentence and talk about the identity of seeing ourselves as in Christ. Paul's big idea is that we should understand and know and see ourselves as in Christ. 12 verses in this sort of sentence, this explanation, this big picture idea of what God is on about. 11 times Paul says in the original language we should be in Christ or in him or in whom. 11 times in these short 12 verses. We get 9 in the English translation. A few are lost in translation somewhere. I don't exactly know how that worked. But this is Paul's big idea, and he wants us to see that we should understand and know ourselves as in Christ. And when we do, it's a difference between standing in the shower at 7.5 litres of water per minute thinking, this is it. This is the extent to which water is fun and I can enjoy it. This is what swimming is like, compared to going down the road and jumping in the ocean and experiencing this expanse of the ocean and the water and all that it has to offer. When we see ourselves as in Christ, it's something incredibly different. The capacity limit is gone. Let me tell you some more about what I mean. You know, the way many of us see the world is that we look and we test and we assess and we make sense of what we can see and understand and grab hold of around us. What we experience, what we know, our physical reality, the experiences that we have, the stories that we hear, the things we go through day to day in our lives. This is our physical reality, and we see this as the reality of life. And what we tend to do is we think of ourselves as the central player in this physical reality, with the ability to influence and change and guide what happens in this physical reality. We see ourselves as having the ability to shape our own destiny. We find ourselves thinking in ways that my purpose, my fulfillment, my meaning in life will be shaped by what I do. And so I can bring good into this world if I do good things. I can help the world if I help people. I can achieve things if I get it right. And so the way that we think is by putting ourselves in the center of this physical reality and influencing everything else that happens. We are the center stage player in our physical realities. But Paul says here in this text that that's not the whole story. While our physical reality is overwhelming, and we experience things all day, every day that are inputs into this, and they require our attention, and we need to give them adequate space and respond. Paul says that we are not the central player in this physical reality. In verse 4, just before what I read, Paul says that God is the creator. God is the first. He is the center player on the stage that is all that we experience. And he created this physical reality that we see and breathe and experience and think through each and every day. And he has placed it on the side of stage as the experience that we have each and every day. And he is the central player doing his redemptive work throughout all history through this physical reality that you and I live in each and every day. We are not the central player. Our destiny, our purpose, our meaning is not up to us. It is God who is the central player doing his redemptive work in this world. You are not the center of stage. This is good news. Because it's terrifying if you are. How lonely and anxiety producing and fearful is it if your ultimate purpose and fulfillment and meaning in life is dependent on your ability to succeed and to get it right. That's a horrifying, terrifying existence. Paul says there is something better for you than that. That is not the story of the scriptures. Paul says God is the central player. He is in center stage, and we are invited to live in him, to see ourselves and know ourselves and understand ourselves as in Christ. This is Paul's big idea, to take ourselves out of the center of stage, know that we are actually in the side of stage physical reality, and God is in the center stage doing his redemptive work through our day-to-day experiences in life. This is the difference between standing in the shower, 7.5 liters of water per minute, or diving into the ocean. This is the difference that it makes in life. Now, some of you know the phrasing, Christ in me. And you'd understand and may have thought about praying a prayer and inviting Jesus into your life and Christ being in you. And that's good. That's fine thinking. It's biblical. It's Galatians 2, John 14. It's fine. Christ in us is good. Just the thing I want to point out is it's nowhere in Paul's thinking here in Ephesians 1. It doesn't make the cut. When Paul thinks in the big picture of what really matters and what it means to be joined with Christ and a part of his, throughout history, redemptive work that we're in, he doesn't mention Christ in me. He only talks about me in Christ. And so what Paul wants us to understand and know is that this is the big picture, Christ in me. Me in Christ. Christ in me is good. But we can choose to follow Jesus and take the idea of Christ in me and not leave our ideas of the world. We can still choose to follow Jesus, but keep ourselves as a center stage player in the physical reality. And understand Christ in me is Jesus coming to me to help me be the best version of me that I can be so that I can influence and change the world. And actually, we haven't moved far forward from not knowing Jesus at all. We're still in the same vice. We're still under the same capacity limit if my only understanding of God is Christ in me. Because now my prayers are the limiting factor on Jesus' redemptive work in this world. My ability to have faith and to trust and to understand and to know is the thing that will limit my capacity to be involved in God's redemptive work in this world. I become the limiting factor if my identity is about Christ in me. Does that make sense? And so what Paul is wanting us to see is that that's okay, but to keep our identity as us as the center and only see Christ in me as the picture of following Jesus is shaky ground. We haven't moved far forward if that's our understanding. But me in Christ, in him, is a boundless possibility of the redemptive work in this world. Paul is about to go on in the next chapters and say, God is able to do incredibly more than I could ask, seek, or imagine. He's able to do more than my prayers, more than my faith, more than my understanding, more than my ability to grasp what he is doing. This is the work of God in the world. He is not limited by my capacities. But when I see myself as in him, the redemptive work of God in this world is endless, and I am asked to be a participant of the central stage player's work through this physical reality. He invites me to participate with him. And so his gift to me of being in me, we should think of as a lavish outpouring of his grace, a lavish gift. He doesn't have to bind himself to a broken person like me, but he does. He chooses to join himself to someone like me. That's lavish. That's over the top. He could do his redemptive work in this world without that, but he chooses to do it. It's a lavish gift of grace. And his invitation is for me to see my identity as in him. The possibilities for redemption and work and transformation is unending. I am a participant in the unity of all things that he is doing in heaven and on earth. So this doesn't mean that I have no responsibilities now. This doesn't mean that my physical reality and my day-to-day commitments are irrelevant and I should just float through life and not pay attention to them. Not at all. It's just the physical reality and my responsibilities now are opportunities for God's redemptive work to flow through me, or for me to observe and become a part of that redemptive work of unity in the world through Christ as the center. And so every time that I offer compassion or mercy and care, I am aligning myself into that redemptive work which is endless and boundless in its reach in this world. Every time that I choose to forgive and offer love instead of responding in another way, I am participating in this work as Christ as the center. I don't do the work. It's not limited to my capacity. I join in with what Christ is already doing. And so the ultimate reality is that Christ is the center. God is the creator. He is doing his work. And our physical reality, as overwhelming and as drawing as it is to us, it's like the side of stage play. There's so much going on. There's so much to attend to that's important. But Christ is the center. God is the center. And he is fulfilling his redemptive story, and he chooses to do it through the physical realities and experiences of our lives. When we see ourselves and understand ourselves and know that I am in Christ, my identity and my purpose and my fulfillment is in Christ. I step into him. It changes everything. It's not about my capacity anymore. It's about my willingness to step into his wondrous and amazing work, far more than I could ask or imagine. So how do we ensure that we stay here? I want to finish with this idea today. How do we ensure that we stay in Christ? Because my physical reality, it's overwhelming and it draws me and it pulls me in. There's stuff I got to attend to every day. I can't keep up. There's busyness, there's things. All of that is on me all of the time. How do How do I ensure that in my identity and my worldview, I'm not the center of stage player, but God is? And that day in, day out, I see him as the one doing the redemptive work. And I get to join in with him, in him, as a participant. Well, later on, I don't want to jump the gun or, give you too much of a spoiler for you, but just a quick spoiler alert. Ephesians 5, Paul gives us some practical ways to live in our physical reality that remind us and take us into the ultimate reality that Christ is the center. He gives three things in verses 19 and 20 of chapter 5. He says that three practical things that you can do day in, day out. One is worship. Two is gratitude or thanksgiving. And three, and he goes on to explain a lot of examples about number three, is submission or servanthood or sacrifice. And we often forget that what he's saying in these verses and the example that he gives is connected to his big idea about how to be in Christ. And so we have debates and discussions and we get lost down in the weeds of these things when actually what Paul is saying, you want to be in Christ? It's not just airy-fairy head ideas. Your identity can be grounded in these simple practices of faith. Service and sacrifice, submission, these are things for all of us, not for some. Paul says they're for all of us. And they ground us in Christ. They take us back. They help us to mirror what it means to be in Christ. Gratefulness, thankfulness, our new world of well-being is grabbing onto these practices as being something that actually gives you meaning and purpose. And Paul, 2,000 years ago, says, practice this and it will help you ground your identity in something of worth. And then worship. Fascinatingly enough, worship is a physical practice that matters and helps ground us in Christ. And I want to finish today talking about worship. Let me give you a definition for what worship is. Worship is the practice of transporting our hearts from the physical reality of our day-to-day lives and into the ultimate reality that God is the center player at work. Worship is the practice of transporting my heart from the physical realities of our world and into the ultimate reality that Christ is the center. He is in control. He is doing his redemptive work. He is at work today and will be at work and will fulfill this work we can have a confidence in. Let me tell you a story. If that is what worship is, I want to give you an example of how I've experienced this. A number of years ago, I sat in a village in northern Thailand with some of our mission partners, Moana and Vili. You might know them. And as I sat in a circle with maybe 10 or so believers in Thailand, we had the most incredible worship experience I've probably ever had in my life. These believers, they were first generation believers. In Thailand, there's this saying, it goes, to be Thai is to be Buddhist. These two are inseparable identities if you're a Thai person. To be Thai is to be Buddhist. And these were the first generation believers in this little village in northern Thailand who'd said, I've had an encounter with Jesus and I'm going to follow him. They were the overwhelming minority. It's 99.9 or something like that % of the population in Thailand are Buddhist. And here they are trying to follow Jesus. The minority on the edge of their society, on the edge of their culture, on the edge of being excluded from all that they knew and know in their reality, in their physical reality of life. We sat together and had a worship session with them. It was the most incredible time of worship that I've experienced. We sat in this circle. There were no drums. As amazing as our drummers are here at New Hope, they make that really obnoxious instrument beautiful. There were no drums. There was no violin. As beautiful as the violin can be when someone masters it, no violin. As amazing as James is on the keys, no need for James. There was not a keyboard inside. So you might think, it was an acoustic worship set. Fantastic. No acoustic guitar. Sorry, Phil. Sorry, guys. No need for a guitar. Not one inside. So it was some kind of monk, voices only worship experience from the Middle Ages. No singing. We sat in a circle and worshipped God, reading chants and psalms and prayers like they do down the road at the temple. Except in this circle, we read chants that praised Jesus, that placed Jesus as the center of the ultimate reality in the lives of this church. Despite their physical reality, that they were outcast, that they were on the side, that they were knocked out, that they had lost the plot, we sat and read chants that Christ is the center. He's the center of the ultimate reality. And I've got to tell you, as I sat in that circle, it was the most powerful worship experience that I've had. There was no music, but my life was being transformed by the reminder of this reality that Christ is in control. That it doesn't matter the challenges and obstacles that we face in our physical realities, that Christ is doing his redemptive work. And we are invited to participate in it. Worship is the practice of transporting our hearts from the physical realities of our lives into the ultimate reality that Christ is the central player doing his redemptive work. The type of worship, what we do, those are cultural mirrors. We do this and it's fantastic and I love it because I'm a born and bred Westerner who loves music like this, and this is what we do. But worship is not this. Worship is what happens in the heart when I practice my cultural thing. It can be this, it can be art, it can be all sorts of things, but worship is something that is given as a gift from God to transport us and transport our heart into that ultimate reality. Let's stand together. We're going to sing, and my invitation and response for you is just simply this: to let your heart be led by the work of Christ in this moment. To let God be the one who speaks to you in power in this moment. Because worship is a gift given to plant our identities in Christ, to shape us and mold us in Christ, to form us in him, so that our capacity would not be limited to 7.5 litres of water per minute, but you would dive into the ocean of endless possibilities that God has for you. The identity that anything is possible and you are a participant in this mighty and wondrous work of God. Let's sing and worship him together and open our hearts to this moment of worship of our King of Kings and Lord of Lords.